So, like I normally do, I ended up picking up a game that I'd never heard of, as brand new, and just because it was on an introductory sale. Now, this game is called Taboo Trial. It's a very interesting game that I have to say I only picked up because it looked kind of cool, and it said it was about Norse mythology. Honestly, I just thought it was kind of a hack and slash type game with maybe like Odin in it or something, and so I got hyped for it. Although I will say, the title of this game does not do the game justice at all. Taboo Trial sounds like one of those like all-women prison skin flicks from the early 2000s, or maybe even what my college professor proposed I did to get an A. And they wonder why I failed out of college. Anyway though, before we get into Taboo Trial, please hit that like and subscribe button. It means the world to me, and it doesn't cost you anything. So anyway, this game, like I said, kind of sparked my interest, not only because of the title. In fact, honestly, I wasn't even sure what the title was when I purchased it, but it was literally just from the imagery, and on the back it had a lot of like different images of big attack numbers and gigantic creatures, and that's pretty much all I need to get me to purchase a game. I did see that it was a roguelike, but honestly, I don't even know what that means anymore. Sometimes that means very traditional, other times it means there's so many different mechanics in it that it's just kind of hard, but yet you continue on with the story. Regardless, I was willing to give it a shot, and my first impressions of it were far different than my final impressions of it. And just to be clear right off the bat, it is a traditional roguelike. When you die, you get to keep your souls, but not your money. You can take your souls and upgrade yourself. I'll get into that later on in the video. In this game, you are a Norse warrior. You do have an opportunity to change characters, and again, I'll get into that later. Although you're essentially just guarding Valhalla, as well as other notable areas in Norse mythology. I apologize, but I'm not even going to try to say some of them because I have no idea how to pronounce it. Funny, because I recognize the spelling, but I have no idea how to say it. Like, oh, that's Jahutantenbog. I have no clue how to pronounce these names, but my whole point is you are guarding these different areas, and at the time, there's a massive invasion. They don't explain it, but I'm pretty sure these invaders also corrupt a lot of the Norse gods, because you do have to fight against a lot of them, which would only make sense. Considering you're one of the warriors who's attached to them, you would think they'd be on your side, but no, that's not the case. But essentially, you fight a few waves of enemies, then you fight a mini-boss, then you fight another few waves of enemies, and then you fight a boss, and that's essentially one whole level. With most of the combat being how you would expect, with Y being your normal attack and X being your heavy attack, as well as different skills that you can equip as the game goes on, and those being tethered to your left bumper, right bumper, and left trigger, I believe. I know for sure left bumper and left trigger, but I'm not sure about right bumper. I think so. Anyway, after each wave of enemies, you're given a blessing or stat buff, and then a blessing that you can equip or use as a passive skill. You can choose like 2 of them, I believe. It depends on the scenario, but typically it's 2. And most of them are focused on your skills and nothing else. The ones that you get that will give you like permanent upgrades to your attack and to your HP, those are awesome, but they're kind of rare. For the most part, it's, hey, you're gonna equip this skill already, you can make it stronger, you can give it more unique characteristics, which is ultimately the key at being good at this game. When you have so many skills that have so many different passive and active buffs or upgrades, you can pretty much demolish a lot of these enemies pretty quickly. But if you're just focusing on just your weapon and just kind of grinding that way, it's going to take you forever. You really do have to get used to using your skills as well as your weapon. My favorite thing was using the blessings to the point where a skill could be triggered by a normal attack. That way you don't even have to worry about hitting the skills. Just doing your normal attacks will make some of these skills pop off, and then you're doing like crazy damage. The thing is that usually happens a little bit later in the game, actually not as far as what you would believe. If you pay attention to your blessings and you upgrade the character and the skills appropriately, you can get pretty strong pretty quick. There are also other resources that you can find out on the battlefield. Like I talked about souls already, and I don't believe they're actually souls, I think they're gems. But those you can use to upgrade runes. Now, you do have a set amount of runes that are equipped to you. You get them early on, basically after your first death, and these do affect a number of things, but you can use those to upgrade each rune, and there is 6, I believe, as you first start, and upgrading them can just make them more and more powerful, giving you more attack, giving you more stun ability, things like that. You are also able to find other runes and equip other runes in between runs. The other couple of resources that you're able to find, one is holy water, which you can give to other characters, and doing this will actually allow that character to be playable. You have to give them them 3 before they become a character that you can use in battle. But honestly, there's absolutely nothing else you can do with the holy water, so you might as well just unlock characters. The other resource that can be found is God Rings, and God Rings unlock new weaponry. Now, I suggest when you start playing the game, save 4. Go for the Gungnir. I think that's how you say it. It's an awesome lance that's in Final Fantasy and many other things. But for me, it was basically the best weapon in the game, and I ultimately loved having that distance while also having attack power, so it's a great weapon. So if you made it this far, I'm sure you might be thinking, okay, so this game actually sounds pretty cool. And you'd be right, because I haven't talked about any of the negative things yet. One of my first concerns about the game was, well, how's it going to perform? On the Switch, that's always a constant concern that we have, and I can't speak to any other version of the game, but I can tell you on the Switch, very early on, it performs great early on, until you start unlocking some of those skills that I was talking about, and more importantly, the ability to passively trigger spells by using normal attacks. So there's a point where you can basically trigger like 3 or 4 different skills with just normal attacks, and you have about a 30% chance to trigger those skills. And so as you're just doing normal combat, there is all these spells and skills going off, as well as there just being a bunch of enemies on screen. Well, let me tell you, the Switch does not like this, and this is where you can really start getting the slowdown, the lag. You see, I forgot to mention one thing. After the battles, early on or at any point, the game does kind of lag a little bit, but it doesn't really affect the gameplay because it doesn't happen in combat. It just happens like right before you're given your resources or your upgrades or whatever, your blessings, if you will. Now, when you have all of these skills going up, you have a bunch of really spongy enemies up there, the game starts doing it in combat. And that is one of the big issues with the game. In fact, this lag, this stuttering, it caused quite a few deaths on my part, which is about enough to make you rip your hair out because you're at the point where you can go pretty far in the run. And it's taken quite a bit of time, and then just for you to die because of a lag, it's so annoying. But that's not the only issue with the game as far as programming. You see, sometimes the enemies can actually go through the floor. Now, they don't die, they can just still keep attacking you and harming you, and it's very hard to hit them. You can do it, but it takes forever. Meanwhile, they're just like cheap-shotting you. It's annoying, hasn't ever been like anything game-breaking, but it just goes further into the rush job that was done with this, the amount of patches that this game needs, because also, as I discovered, you can just walk off the side of the edge and you'll still hang out there like Wile E. Coyote style without ever actually falling. And I do believe that the game was rushed because one of the other things that really comes up a lot is just the enemy types. I swear there's only like 7. They're like, hey, let's just recycle them, but make them a little bit more spongy each time. And then there's the bosses, which I swear this is the cardinal sin. Don't make your gamer play the same boss multiple times. It's not what we do it for. When we beat the boss, we want to know we reign supreme. But in this game, the main boss from like the first level is a mini boss in like the 3rd level. This happens multiple times with many of the quote-unquote bosses. But the thing that I believe is the most egregious, to me anyway, is when you first purchase the game, you also see other downloadable content. It's characters. You can purchase other characters. So they took the time to make sure that there was DLC that you could purchase, but not to actually bring out a game that, number one, just had different enemy types. You know, bosses being the most important, I get using the same, just like random enemies, cool, fine. But bosses? No, you can't do that with bosses. Let me scale that back real quick, because actually number one should be performance. So the game should be able to run adequately, even if there's a bunch of stuff going on. I know that's probably a difficult job, but I think that's a little bit more important than purchasable characters. On the other side, the game is $19.99. Yes, it's on sale for $14.99 or $15.99. And honestly, if the game was in really good shape, where it ran really well, and maybe had a different assortment of bosses, I could see it actually being worth about $14.99, because there is quite a bit of content in the game. It does seem linear, but there is quite a bit of content when you really break it down, as well as there just being pretty good visuals, pretty good sound. Like, everything on it is really good when you look at it from that aspect, until you start breaking down some of the corners that they cut, the DLC and things of that nature. That all starts to add up to be pretty negative. So at the moment, I have to give it a 5.5 out of 10. I just feel like their priorities were in the wrong spot, and making sure the game ran right should have been number one, not DLC. And yeah, hopefully they do fix it, because like I said, it's got fairly nice visuals, the audio is pretty good, controls are great, the mechanics are even really good. I even think that there's a lot of fun to be had in the game just in general, although it's just that late game or mid to late game sort of performance that needs to be fixed. If it was fixed, I would definitely give it like a 7.5, maybe even an 8 out of 10, just for the experience. It's pretty decent, but ultimately, as it sits now, like I said, it's a 5.5. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have you played this game? Are you thinking about picking it up? Is it something you saw in the eShop and you were curious about? Or let me know what game you're playing right now. Anything and everything in the comment section is much appreciated. By the way, quick shout out to John, I believe his name is. He recommended picking up Strife. It's like an old school boomer shooter. My son loves that game and it's been really cool. Also, it was on sale for like $2. It's a really good, fun pickup. Anyway, I love each and every one of you guys. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.